You're good? All
We're
right.
live.
Is Emma checking it all out from downstairs to know if she can hear it, or is she?
Yeah, and she's on the outside just if anyone's coming in late.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kim Blackwell. I'm the Artistic Director of Fourth Line Theatre, and welcome to our Artist Talk series. And I'm thrilled to be joined here at the venerable Peterborough Theatre Guild by playwright, actor, director, dramaturg. Could you direct audiobooks? I'm going to say director. Bev Cooper. And we're on the set of a show I'm directing here at the Theatre Guild, which opens on Friday, Morris Panish's Girl in the Goldfish Bowl. And you have a connection to this set and this play.
Yeah, well, my husband, who's an actor,
yes.
John Jarvis, was in the first production of that show. And it's such a great play. It's so funny.
And the production in 2002 that I saw John in, and Christina Nicol, and a whole bunch of other wonderful people, is the production that's imprinted with me, and why I wanted to direct it.
Yeah, it's a great show.
And John and Christina Nicol, who won the Dora for playing Iris, are both coming to see the show on May 16th, and we're going to do a Q&A with them and some of the cast afterwards here on the set. So
I think John was nominated.
he probably was, yeah. I'm sure they can go back and let us know, John, if we're wrong. So thank you so much for joining me and coming to Peterborough from the east end of Toronto today. Oh, I'm going to make sure I only have it in case I'm looking up any information about you. So, hi. Hi there. Is everybody good? Phones are off? Yes? Okay, we're here. Great, okay. Am I right that are you born and raised in Vancouver or just in BC?
Vancouver, I'm a Vancouver girl.
You are?
Yeah.
Okay, and how long? How many generations of family?
Well, we're going to go back to the homeland.
What year? Because she brought some dates for some other things. What year did the family come to BC?
So my grandmother came from Sweden to the interior of BC in 1918, around there. Yeah. Actually, a little earlier than that, because I think she was 12. My grandparents from my dad's side came from England and landed in Saskatoon, sort of Depression.
But you like you landed. It makes it sound like the boat landed.
Yeah, just
that would not be true.
And my other grandfather was from the States, so they would get to Vancouver. My mother was born in Trail, and then when my grandfather, it's interesting actually about my grandfather, we were going back there, he worked for Cominco in Trail, which was part of the Manhattan Project. Oh, I didn't know that he was involved in that until recently. Anyway, after he died, they moved to Vancouver, my grandmother and my sister.
Was there ever any time? So I know you went to Studio 58.
Yeah.
So you graduated from the acting program.
Yeah.
Right? So
yeah.
They have this. They love to claim the fame. We can talk about that. Because someone can use that. But 30 people started and only 2 graduated.
Oh
was
yeah. It was 16 we started with, and 6 graduated. Yeah.
Wow.
1 guy and 5 women graduated. Yeah.
Right.
It was cutthroat. It was, yeah.
And when you were growing up, before going to Studio 58, which is sort of like it's a renowned acting school on the level of the National Theatre School of Canada in this end, right? Would
I would
fair
say
to
so.
say? Yeah. Growing up, were you always acting, or tell me about how?
I certainly was a child of pretend, for sure, and writing. And I wrote plays, and I played in the backyard, and I always was really excited about it. And I remember my when I was in elementary school and about to go to high school, a friend of my sister's saying, "I'm taking drama," and I thought, "There's a word for what this is." It just seemed so exciting. So then I took acting classes in theater in high school, and my drama teacher in grade 11 and 12 was Fran Norman, who, I don't know if you know who Merrick Norman is.
Oh, yes.
His mom.
Okay.
And so
Merrick is a well-known librettist and writer of things and musicals.
And he used to Merrick was in his 20s then, and he used to come and do theater projects with our high school. And he did a production of Jesus Christ Superstar, and we had he was at UBC with Brent Carver, and Brent Carver came and sang. Brent Carver came and sang and in Jesus Christ Superstar with us. So there was kind of this sense, and Gord McCall, I don't remember Gord McCall, who was also a professional director, came and directed us in a production of Arsenic and Old Lace.
Oh my gosh. There's a trap door here, and I saw Arsenic and Old Lace when I was a kid, and they used that trap to be a seller. I'm just saying. I just mentioned Arsenic and Old Lace to my daughter 3 hours ago.
What do you remember about that show? There was, we had someone from CBC come and do our makeup, and we had latex in here. And of course, I was playing one of the old ladies, and it used to just fall and fly. But she was a tough teacher, and she really instilled us that there's a seriousness.
Wait, and this is all in high school?
This is in high school, yeah. This is Fran Norman, and she, said there's a seriousness to this. And then when I found out you could go on and go to theater school, I had no choice. I had to go.
And family, how was the reaction to that?
There's no other actors in it. My dad was an engineer, and my mother was a bacteriologist, and they were freaked but supportive. Yeah.
That should be on every theater school kids. T-shirt freak but supportive.
They were super supportive, but I think they were also, when's she going to get a real job? Like, how is this going to work out? But I also, when I was in high school, I did this amateur production of, I think it was Beauty and the Beast, and the director of that directed the Beachcombers, and they were looking for kids to be in it. So I did 4 episodes of the Beachcombers, and I thought, okay, this is good. You get paid, get a per diem, they pick you up, they take you, And
it's going to be like that.
It's going to be like that, And I think they saw my paycheck and went, okay, she's set.
And I think they're probably making the same Beachcomber money now as they did then.
Yeah, I think so.
So you graduated from Studio 58, and because I think if you was a Toronto person, you've been in Toronto most of your adult life, right? How does that transition to coming east happen?
Well, I think I enjoyed theater school, but I felt like I needed more classes. I felt I needed to move out of home. I felt like Toronto was the place to be. So I came really to take more classes and kind of keep exploring as an actor, I think. I didn't have a lot of confidence, I would say. And so it was trying to find my confidence and then.
So are you having a hard time hearing?
Yeah.
Okay, we will talk louder. No, we'll talk louder. That's why
Maybe
you're there you go. Okay. So you came to Toronto, and let me just ask about that. So who were you taking classes with? Where was it?
The cast, I don't know if you remember Kurt Reese.
No.
I remember taking a class with Rosemary Dunsmore and Carol Rosenfeld from New York, and I was just kind of exploring, I think, a little bit, and I got an agent and started doing auditions.
And how quickly did you sort of get a role, or how did that happen, stage or film and television?
I think I got film and TV, little bits and commercials. I did a lot of commercials. I also did a little bit of modeling, kind of did everything. But one of the first shows I did was with Maggie Huchelak, who is here today. And it was all-female production of Three Sisters.
Oh, where was that at?
It was first at the Theatre Center, and then we remounted it at Berkeley Street. Canadians, it wasn't Canadian Stage.
Toronto Free? No.
It was Toronto Free.
Was it Toronto Free?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and Maggie was in it, and Tanya Jacobs was in it. She played Chaputigan, and it had a great cast. Karen Woolridge did it.
Is that how you got your equity card, or when did you get
I got my equity card. Actually, I think I got my equity card doing a show called Rude Noises for a Blank Generation by Brad Fraser.
Oh. Was it like a real Brad Fraser? Like salty, dirty?
Salty, dirty. I played a mannequin.
What does Brad think of women?
I did this. And I think because I was a member of ACTRA.
Already from the Beachcombers?
From the Beachcombers.
Yeah, okay.
And other things, I guess. So I did that show. That was my first equity show at Pass Marai.
And were you an ingenue? Like, I know you played an old lady in Arsenic and Old Lace, but like when you get into the actual business.
So ingenue.
You were.
Yeah,
Some of us would never have gotten that. We were playing old ladies from day one. Character actor.
Well, I looked very young. I was really young. Even at 30, I was playing 17-year-olds.
Well, Allison was saying the same thing last week as an actor. She was playing teenagers, and you guys strike me as sort of similar.
Yeah. And being blonde, I was very much slow. I played a lot of nurses and ingenue kind of parts. And I think actually why I started writing is because I was frustrated by those kind of parts that weren't that interesting necessarily all the time. And so to write parts for myself seemed to be the best way to go about reinventing myself as well.
And so in terms of your writing, you've always written, like, are you a journaler, or were you writing?
I took creative writing in high school, and I liked writing. And I think when I look back on theater school, where I excelled is when we were creating things, like in my mime class, which was run by Wendy Gorling.
The Overcoat, right?
Yeah.
She did the choreography for Morris's play, The Overcoat. Let's find out how we should do a drinking game. How many times we can make interconnections in the Canadian theater world.
Yeah, lots of them.
Yeah.
And we had to create shows, and I think that actually kept me in theater school. I think they would have liked to have dumped me earlier. They could have. It was, and then I also discovered that I really enjoyed doing new Canadian plays. That I found that as an actor, that's where I felt excited about doing theater. And I was lucky enough to have been in the first production of Nothing Sacred, and Goodnight Desdemona, and Paul Gross's play. What's it called? I can't remember. It's going out of my head, but it was hugely successful with Jackie Burroughs.
Oh.
And it was really successful. So I think seeing those first productions and how everybody coming together to make something exciting and new really excited me about creation.
And so do you remember sort of the first
Dead of Winter, that was the Paul.
I didn't even know he was a writer. I guess it's different, Paul Gross.
No, he was a playwright when he first came to town. Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea. Okay. The things I don't know. Good for the book. So I am curious in terms of when you start to write serious plays, you were collaborating with people.
Yeah, so the
I'm curious
writing,
about
so
that.
the first writing I did was with Anne-Marie MacDonald.
Yes. Is this the Nancy Drew?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So that was a great way to kind of get into writing, is that it's actually a kind of funny story, because we were driving back from Stratford. She was in the back seat and I was in the front, and I think John was driving. And she said, I'm going to write a play about Nancy Drew. And I thought she said, let's write a play. And I said, that's a great mistake. I said, okay, let's do that. And then she was like, oh, okay. So we did. So we wrote, there was, it used to be FemCab, and so Buddies and Nightwood together used to have a festival of new work.
Okay.
And so Nightwood gave us a little bit of seed money, and we wrote like a half-hour play about Nancy Drew. And it was a political satire, kind of dark comedy, funny thing. And then Clark Rogers from Past Mariahs came to see it. He said, I think you should expand it, and I think you should do it as a late-night series.
Oh.
So
like an improv series, sort of?
It wasn't improv.
Okay.
So it went for 6 weeks at Past Mariah. And we started in the backspace, and then we ended up in the main space because it became popular. And we'd do it at 11 o'clock on a Friday night. And so we would, on Sunday, Anne-Marie and I would get together and decide the story, and we'd divvy up the scenes, and then we'd go away and write them, and come back Tuesday, and then give each other scenes and rewrite them. Wednesday, our director Maureen White would come and dramaturge. We'd rewrite Thursday, cast it Thursday, rehearse it Friday, and do it Friday night.
Oh, right.
But how much script was being held during this?
Well, they weren't being held. They were being hidden behind newspapers.
Behind the fruit bowl.
Yeah, they were being hidden. And it was, well, I guess it's kind of like doing live TV or live anything, right? The adrenaline was exciting. It was fun.
Through, yeah.
And we had great cast, and Lane Coleman was Carson Drew,
So they were sort of each week of those 6 weeks you had written sort of solving a murder?
Yeah, solving a mystery. Yeah, but so what we did was, the idea was Nancy came from the book world into the modern world to help Janice the babysitter solve a mystery. And so it was the two characters of Perfect Nancy.
Was that you?
We switched.
Oh,
Because we both wanted to play both parts, so we would switch
Perfect.
each week. And so then, they had their adventures solving. It was, what I think the mystery was, there's two right-wing villains who are going to take over the world and clone everybody to become like Nancy Drew, and what she realized is that we need individuality.
Okay.
You know.
All right.
So then that was a hit, and so then we made it into 3 episodes, and then we performed it, we rewrote it, and then performed it at Passmarai for 6 weeks or something.
And has it ever had another life?
I had a couple of other lives. They've done it in Vancouver. They did it a bunch, and then a few years ago, somebody thought they were going to rewrite it and do it again. And then we went down a very long road of trying to make it into a film, and I made quite a bit of money that it'll never happen.
Like they just kept keeping going, giving you their money.
And then rights. And now somebody has the rights.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It'll never.
How does it hold up when you read it?
The basic story really holds up. You know, it's funny. I mean, we were out there. I don't know. We had Flipper as a character. Barbie was a character. It was like Barbie, like her Nancy coming into the real world. It's not dissimilar to that movie. Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's a little better, the Barbie movie.
I would not say. Who's to say? I'm curious because a lot of your work, especially some of that early work when you were with Emery and with Benita Rubis, it seems feminist and political. Were you raised in a political household, or where does your political feminist sort of ideas come from? Or
I think growing up in the 70s in Vancouver, I think there was a lot of issues, and I remember marching against Amchitka, them testing bombs in Amchitka. I don't think, my parents were not political, and I had a lot of fights with my conservative dad.
He voted conservative?
Oh, yeah. But, I also think they brought me up to stick up for myself and to have sympathy for those less fortunate than myself. And so I would say I feel that always when you're writing something, and I read a great book, I remember, about all writing is political. But you have a point of view about everything, and Girl in the Goldfish Bowl, has a point of view, and Neil Simon had a point of view, even if you might not see it. I think it all comes from something. So I don't think you want to write political theater in that's going to hit you over the head. I think you want people to question. I read a beautiful quote about playwriting, and I think it's attributed to Thornton Wilder, that theater is the most perfect way to find out what we are, what it means to be human, or something like that. So I think,
well, I certainly think so. Go see lots of theater for that exact reason.
I think it does. So I think also the best kind of theater makes you come out with questions, right? You don't want all the answers as well, right? So I would call myself, and I think, growing up in the 70s, feminism was coming to the fore, right? And so fighting against my dad to wear my jeans, or, to be a woman who can do anything she wants. Not that he was against that. I think he was just flabbergasted, by the changes in the world.
Are there other sisters in the house? Were you all?
My sister, I have one older sister. And I think I saw my mom, who, she trained, she was a bacteriologist, and then when she had kids, she was at home. And I think she had a lot of brains and could have done more with her life, and would have liked to have done more with her life.
Right. So those
roles. She couldn't quite bust out of them, but you were observing that.
I think so, yeah, and I think so many women were then. You know, I remember, you know, Billie Jean King playing Bobby Riggs,
Yes,
right? And it's
right.
all getting so worked up about it, right? So I think, and I think we have, you know, people take it for granted now, I think, what it was.
But also, the
before.
struggle's not over.
The struggle's definitely not over.
You were just talking about the inheritance. I think there was one woman out of 12 actors.
Yeah, I don't mind that because it really, that play, so The Inheritance is a play that's just in.
I'm not trashing the inheritance. I'm
but-
observing that.
Yeah, and I had a discussion with somebody, why couldn't there have been more women? But it is about gay men.
Mhm.
That's what it's about, right?
Yeah, so if you put a play like that in a season, you have to balance the programming. I worry sometimes not, I'm not saying where, but there have been other theaters where I went in Toronto to 4 shows in a row and it was all men.
Yeah, I mean.
And 80% of the actors out there are women vying for probably
Yeah.
less than 20% of the roles. I mean, the struggle is real and they're still training far more women in theatre schools across Canada, and I suspect it's similar in other
And-
countries.
No offense to the men here, but
Yeah, none.
most of the audiences.
80% of the arts buying decisions are made by women.
Yeah.
That is the truth.
Yeah.
In the early days at Fourth Line, the women would call when it was just all on the phone, and then I would be doing box office transactions, and then they'd hand their husbands the phone to give them the directions.
Oh.
That's how it worked to get to Fourth Line in the early days. But the women are making the arts buying decisions.
Right,
For
so,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you then, you're having a fairly successful career as an actor. And I am, okay, I want to hear about that then, because I want to know if there's a point where that changes or alters. Alison and I were talking about it last week as well, but I'm curious for you, was there a moment where you go, oh, it's dried up, or
Well,
is it as simple as
I
that?
think, so in those early days, I waitressed a lot
Okay.
at Second City
Oh,
and met these 3 there.
Okay, all right. Waitressing, or these were the doyens of the stage? Linda was waitressing?
And when he was waitressing, and then Derek was acting, he was an actor.
Of course he was.
But-
Derek McGrath is in the audience.
Linda and I both auditioned for the touring company at the same time, and Linda got the part. So, and as she should have. It was a great place to work, though. I mean, we saw amazing people, for sure. I think the moment where I was kind of transitioning, and I started writing. So I was doing some playwriting. With Anne Marie, we also wrote another show called The Road Shows, which is based on the old Bing Crosby
Oh yeah,
Bob
the
Hope shows, and we made those into political satire as well. And Anne Marie and I would tap dance. So it was another neat thing. And then Anne Marie and I wrote an episode of Street Legal, and so we're starting to kind of move. And then I started writing for radio. I worked for a long time writing for CBC audio radio drama.
Before, I know, I'm sorry, God rest its soul.
So
Afghanada or before Afghanada?
way before Afghanada,
Okay,
up
alright.
into Afghanada.
Okay.
Yeah, I worked on Afghanada. And then when John and I had children,
Mm-hmm.
and he's an actor, and I did a couple of tours away from the kids, and tried to take the kids with me, and I found it really hard. You know, when I'd see this schedule come up, and I'd burst into tears because I didn't have childcare, and trying to do that juggle and doing a tour out in New Brunswick and taking Will with me, he wasn't sleeping. You know, it's just.
And you can do it when they're little, but there's a certain critical point where
Yeah.
they just have to, unless you're homeschooling, they just have to go to school.
Yeah.
And they also get
And
into their
somebody
own
has to
activities.
be there, right? And John was working and touring, and he couldn't have both of us doing it, and I was enjoying the writing. So I didn't feel like it was a sacrifice, I gravitated more. And I made a lot of my income from writing in radio drama, and I worked on, over the years I worked on it, I probably worked on 80 different radio dramas.
Wow.
Yeah, either writing, story editing, directing, producing.
Is there a favorite, one or two in all of that?
Yeah, there's one, Did you do
Og?
Secret
You did
World of
Og.
Og? But did you do the Super Adventures of Mary Marvelous as well?
I think I did.
Yeah. So there was we did a series called, as Kathy Disher was Mary Marvelous, and the premise was that she was a stay-at-home mom with 2 kids and a husband, and one day a bagel gets stuck in the toaster, and she puts a knife in to dislodge it and gets zapped and gets superpowers. So she has this dilemma of saving the world or picking her kids up from school.
So cool.
It was really fun. I think we did about 10 episodes of that. That was fun. And Afghanada was, I didn't ever write Afghanada, but I story edited and produced the 2nd season and directed 6 episodes. And I think it's the high bar probably of radio drama.
It was really good.
Yeah.
I liked it a lot. Tell us what story editing is. How is it different from writing?
Oh, so it's like dramaturgy.
Okay,
you know?
so like someone like an Adam Peddle who's working on that.
Yeah,
you
so
would-
Adam would send me a script and I would give notes and yeah, it's just.
Now I'm curious, is it when radio drama ends that you decide to go and get your MFA, or are those not there's mutually?
It was around the same time.
Okay.
Yeah,
And where's the decision to go? Like you went to Guelph and you got your MFA in playwriting, right?
and creative writing.
In creative writing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'd been thinking, so I went to theater school, I didn't have an undergrad. I kind of always thought maybe I'd go to university sometime and have that experience. And then somebody said, oh, you don't necessarily have to have an undergrad to get an MFA if they accept your body of work. And then I was kind of looking for the right program. U of T was like, no, we wouldn't take you. no.
Pleasant.
Yeah,
Thanks, U of T.
absolutely not. But Guelph would, and so I had to be on probation for a year.
What
But
does that mean?
it means if I'm not up to snuff,
You were out because
I could
of
be
the
out.
lack
I
of
could
the
be out.
undergrad.
I think because of the lack of the undergrad. But I didn't really. I wasn't sweating it. So they did, and I applied, and I loved doing it because I was really. I think my mom and dad both passed away by that time, so I was really doing it for myself. You know, for the love of learning, and when I was writing for myself. I wasn't writing, you know, I didn't care what my marks were. I was writing, and also I loved the readings and the thinking about it and workshopping things. And I had great Judith Thompson was my playwriting teacher, and David Young was my other playwriting teacher, and Michael Winter was my fiction teacher, and Catherine Bush was the head of the department, and so it was fantastic. And Robert Chait was in my class.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Did you write a play as a final
I
thesis?
wrote 2 plays.
Okay.
Yeah, my final thesis was a play that's never been produced.
Tell us.
It's
Should it be?
it should be, yeah, it should be. It's about radio drama and the death of it. And so the first half is about the glory days, you know, of when the 1940s, when they're doing live everything, and the second half is when it's falling apart. And
Did you start in like the building over on Jarvis, or were you always in the big city?
I started in Jarvis.
You did.
Yeah,
Okay. So
yeah.
you really have seen it all.
Yeah, not that far back.
No,
but yeah, and I also got a Chalmers grant 1 year, and they're big fat grants to explore big subjects, and it was to explore: what's the history of radio drama in Canada, and can it be kept going even if CBC's not there? So I did a lot of thinking about that. So that play called Making Waves. And the other play that I wrote in Judith's class is called Janet Wilson Meets the Queen.
Oh yeah, that's what that's.
Yeah, so that was done in Ottawa. Yeah.
Yeah, great. You've got a bit of a relationship with the Blythe Festival. I'm curious where that writing relationship comes from.
That comes from, well, John had worked there many summers, and I'd gone up there with the kids, and I think it was Eric Coates was running it when I pitched him an idea, and I wrote a play called The Eyes of Heaven, and that went well, and which was directed by Gina Wilkinson.
God rest her soul as well. Became a good friend, right?
Yeah, really close friend. Yeah, and And then dear Eric, said to me, would I be interested in writing a play about Stephen Truscott? And so,
And did you say yes right away?
no, I
Tell me.
didn't, because I didn't know the story that well. I grew up in Vancouver, it wasn't on my radar. But Anne-Marie had written The Way the Crow Flies, which is semi-based on it.
I
So-
couldn't finish reading it. I was so upset. I found it such an upsetting book.
Mhm.
It was very good, but I
Mhm.
don't know.
Yeah. It's haunting.
It is haunting, yeah. So the Stephen Truscott case, for those who don't know, Stephen, you want to
So
just explain it?
Stephen Truscott in I should have my dates.
Oh, no.
1959.
Yeah.
Was a 14-year-old boy living on a military base in Clinton, just outside of Clinton, and his 12-year-old classmate, Lynn Harper, was found raped and strangled just off the base in Lawson's Bush. And Stephen was the last person ever to have seen her alive that they know of. So, and then it wasn't, so he was charged, convicted, spent 10 years in jail, and then it wasn't until the 2000s that he was finally acquitted and got, in 2007, I think, was when he was awarded compensation. So it's an incredible story.
It is incredible.
And it happened right outside of Blythe, and it was a hot potato because in Blythe, there are still people who believed he was guilty. And it kind of tore families apart, that do we believe in our institutions, or do we believe in justice, and how does this happen in a community? And so I took Anne-Marie out for lunch and I said, should I write this play? And she said, absolutely. And then she handed me a box like this of research materials. And so I started. And then, and so that was the fall. And I think I was working on Afghanida then. So I said to Eric, I can't write, a word until January. So let's do it for a year and a half, almost 2 years from now. And he said, no. The decision coming down about his, there's going to be a big major decision coming down.
In 2007, and
Yeah.
it came on, you put it on in 2008, right?
2007.
Oh, you
It was
put
the
it on in
first time.
2007.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then in 2008 was remounted.
The remount.
Yeah.
This is your play Lost Innocence.
Innocence Lost.
Innocence Lost.
Yeah.
Innocence
So,
Lost,
January, I'm starting to write, just starting to write. It's programmed for starting rehearsals in January. Or
In June. So
In
less than
June.
6 months.
Yeah.
Wow.
And somebody from the Guelph newspaper calls me at home and says, I hear you've written a play about Stephen Truscott, and I'd like to know blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
I think I said, I don't like to write about the creative process. I don't like to talk about creative process or something. And then I fell on the floor and was like, oh my God. And I think, I thought, well, we'll just do the trial, right? It's all in the transcripts. And then I realized the story was so much bigger than that.
And you made it about the kids, right?
Yeah, so what I
Yes.
found so interesting about it is what would it have liked to be in that classroom with Stephen and Lynn, and how the kids were affected by this whole story that happened, and how they didn't know this was a popular boy, and he was someone they liked, and did he do it, or didn't they? And so what I did was I created a fictional character who was a classmate of them, and then that really freed me because she could have her perceptions of it. Anyway, it went on that summer and did well, and then it was remounted the following summer.
And went to the
well, not that production, another production
Right.
we did, it was at the Centaur, the National Arts Center.
Right.
And
then Soul Pepper. So I saw it in Soul Pepper. It's interesting because I took a grade 12 law class, and we must have studied the Truscott case. I remember reading the transcripts, the court transcripts, and it was the first time, so I would have been 16 or 17, it was the first time I knew there was injustice in the world,
Yeah.
and that the justice system might fail you and get it
Yeah.
wrong. And I have never forgotten how powerful it was.
Mhm.
We did a staged reading of it during COVID
Right.
with our young company 2021, right? I think, yeah. Yeah, it's a very interesting play. And how was the response? Like, did you get people upset at your take on it or not?
I think it was appreciated that writing it for the people of Blythe, I think kept me very honest of not. I also believe plays I shouldn't be telling them what to think. They've got to come to their own decisions about what they think happened. Of course, I had my point of view, but I tried not to hit them over the head. And I think I tried to show the other. My central question of the play was, how did this happen? Like, how did we almost hang a 14-year-old boy for a crime that he did not commit? And so I wanted to show how that happened, and not. I think people in the town were really hurt by the book of Isabelle Laborda's, which was monumental in getting Stephen Truscott acquitted, eventually acquitted. But they were painted as kind of redneck, small town people who didn't know any better. But in fact, the jury only had the information that they got.
Yeah. Was it?
And the judge.
Trial in Goderich?
The trial was in Goderich.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
right.
And nothing like that had ever happened in a place like that. You can imagine the panic, the horror, and people always say, "Who did it?" And, well, I don't know, but there's a lot of military men there, and do you
transient?
Transient men. And if you look at the pedophiles who were in the neighborhood, that during that time there was somebody who tried to get girls into his car. Like there's lots of suspects out there, but he was a very easy suspect, and
because he was last seen riding her.
So he
doubling her.
Yeah,
right?
he doubled her on his bike to the highway, and he said he rode back to the bridge, turned around, and saw her get into a car, and he was able to say the make and the car, what kind it was, and the color of the license plates, and it got skewed around to that he said he saw the numbers on the license plate, and you could never have seen them from that distance.
From that distance, right?
Yeah, and he had sores on his penis. And,
right.
They were, but it was a real failure of the military. The head of the OPP was the biggest villain, in my opinion.
Okay.
The local doctors, he was failed, and at that point you didn't need disclosure, so now you have to disclose certain evidence, but you didn't then, and it was like mistake after mistake after mistake. It's like
There's the rain, by the way. That was coming at 2:39.
Yeah. I rarely look at the weather report in the winter. I was like, oh, I think it's going to rain today. I want to ask one more question about that, and then I want to switch gears to your work at Fourth Line, why we're here today. We're here to hear about all this too, of course. But Stephen Truscott came to see the play?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really amazing. I knew he was, so I had said to Eric, I don't necessarily need their approval, but they need to know I'm writing this play, and I want them to be able to say, don't write this play if they don't want it written.
Okay, him and his wife, or
His
his family?
wife, yeah, his family, because I thought I don't want any more pain caused. And so he wrote them again, and never heard back. And I think they were like, I'm not saying yes or no, we don't know what it is. And so then I had contacted one of his school friends who lived in Clinton, and she was his girlfriend at 14. And I went to see her, and she was people were very cautious about talking to me because they were now friends with him and didn't want that impeded. And I said, my play is not more important than your friendship. So let me write the play. I'll send it to you. If anything you've said is in there that you don't think it should be, that's fine. I'll take it out. And I said that to other people that I was speaking to. And so I sent it to her, and she loved it, and then told them it was going to be okay, just go. And then there was some talk of him coming opening, but he didn't. Thank God. But she came. Karen came.
The friend, the classmate.
Yeah, with some other classmates, and she came, I think, to make sure it was going to be okay for him to come. And I had written to Marlene, his wife, and said this, and said, if you would like to come, I'm happy to arrange tickets, etc. And so they came, and so because I had arranged the tickets, I knew they were coming. And so I went, and Anne-Marie came with me, and they sat me right behind Stephen, Stephen, and his wife, and his friends, and Anne-Marie here, and the aisle is here, and a little girl, before the show started, a little girl about 12 came over and said, Mr. Truscott, may I have your autograph? And then it was absolutely surreal watching him watch this play about his life, and I could tell which actors knew he was in the audience, because we had said, do not tell the actors. But somebody spilled the beans in the men's dressing room, and I could tell all the men knew. But the women didn't know.
Wow.
Yeah. And then he came backstage, and it was, he was very gracious and lovely. It is very moving. It is really, every time it's been done, somebody comes up to me and said, when I was at the National Arts Center, one of the lawyers who had been part of the decision to do the acquittal said it was the most, I did a talk with Erwin Kotler, and then James Lockyer, who was his lawyer that helped get him acquitted, came to see the Soulpepper one, and he, it's an incredible story, and I feel incredibly blessed to have worked on it, and it was a gift.
Wow. And almost 70 years later, it still is part of the consciousness.
Yeah, and it always should be. Yeah,
to be reminded of that for sure. I want to switch gears now and just talk about how do you come to write a play for Fourth Line Theatre? Well, on that note, Jim Let's Go Report is not your first play for Fourth Line, but do tell how you come to know us.
So I've come to see shows here and always loved it, and I thought, I think I should write a play for Fourth Line. And so I think I wrote to you and said, I wrote a radio drama about someone named Pearl Hart. And I think it would make a good play.
Maya's in the front row.
I said, sorry, Maya scooped you on that one. So, but you said maybe a Christmas show. So I came up and saw the venues and stuff, and then wrote the other Strange Christmas Tale. And I really enjoyed working on it, and I loved.
Linda was in it.
Yeah.
Was anybody else here? Gailey, did you work on it? Not that one. Okay.
And it was so much fun. And when I write a play for the Blythe Festival or other theaters, in my contract it says no more than 6 characters. I think my commission from Fourth Line was at least 20. And that is such a gift for a playwright. We never get that. I mean, Innocence Lost has 10 people on it, and it probably would never be produced. Yeah.
Financially.
With an all professional.
All professional company, yeah. And what was that first experience like? I mean, we moved pretty quickly from that first maybe call in January through to December having it done, I feel like.
Yeah, it was quite quickly.
It was.
Yeah.
Usually our process is somewhere between 3 and 5 years. Now, with the COVID, people have had plays. I mean, this was supposed to be done 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So we've been waiting longer, but that was very quick for us. What was that like, developing it and then seeing it get up? And we did it immersively outside in the winter. Linda knows.
Well, I think what's so fun is, the community feel of it, right? All the people, and what's so great is, because the community has been doing so many shows for Fourth Line, they're all great, right? And they know the drill and know how to do it, and all the kids. And you are a master of corralling it.
I call it less directing, more gerbil.
Yeah. And what I also love about writing for you in your theater is I don't get, no, I can't do that. I get, I can have a horse, Can I have a horse? I think we could get a horse, It's pretty great. Right, yeah.
I think that's the fun, well, I think that should be all theater. Because I think it's the theater and the director's job to solve it. And the first time I remember that was 1997. Robert and Ian McLaughlin, his writing partner, wrote Crow Hill, the telephone play. And Robert wrote a Hurricane Hazel, that he was going to have to figure out how to direct. And so I just, I think I stage managed the show that year, and I thought, well, okay, like you then just have the responsibility to figure out how to create a hurricane physically without all of the bells and whistles, say that a film might have. But that is part of the magic of theater. Even if you wrote it indoors and you write a hurricane or a horse or the things. I mean, think of it something like War Horse, all those horses on stage. How do you do something like that? That's what makes our medium differentiates it from film and television, is the suspension of disbelief and also the magic we create.
I think that's why I liked writing for radio drama as well, is you can go anywhere and have anything, right, as well.
So that was very successful, I've got to say, artistically, and it sold out and people loved it and all that. And then, so I assume you're kind of always looking at the theaters around the country and thinking about, like, are you pitching other theaters the way you sort of called me and
Well, I
pitched?
think I have to feel like I have a
Entree?
well, no, that they're doing theater that I feel I can contribute to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
And also, I've always loved that outdoor space, and the possibilities of it is very exciting.
yeah. So, did you already know about Jim Watts, or how did you decide to pitch us on this?
I did. Well, do you remember? So we were looking for a. So then after that, you said, "Why don't you write something
for the farm?
For the farm?" And then I was trying to figure out the right idea, and we went to meet Joan Sangster, and she mentioned Jim Watts, and so so Joan.
Explain who Joan is.
Yes. So Joan was. She's an emeritus at Trent in women's studies, I believe, and had written a book about sort of well-known Canadian women. And there was another story that we were kind of looking at, which was about it was about abuse, and I couldn't find my way into writing a play about that. But Jim just. She's an incredible, when you start to read about her, she's just an incredible character and person. And I've always been, so I wrote a radio drama about the Spanish Civil War called Sheila Goes to War.
Right. Yeah.
And so when I heard about Jim Watts, and it appealed to my desire to write something about the Spanish Civil War, and also that sweeping space lends itself. I wanted a big story. If I'm going to tell a story in a big space, I want a big story. So when else am I going to get a chance to have battle scenes and people running off, and I can see the visual sweep of it. I always remember seeing a outdoor play that Michael Shimada directed, a Shakespeare out in Oakville, and the cast coming from way off, there's something so beautiful about that. So. That's sort of how it started. And what was interesting, when I did Sheila Goes to War for CBC, I was really looking for what women, didn't any Canadian women go over? Like, wasn't there any Canadian? And I think she was listed as Jim Watts, and so I didn't think she was a woman when I was looking at the list.
Her name is Eugenia Myrtle.
Yeah,
Watts.
and she's listed as Jean Watts if you actually can find it. I think she was actually maybe as Jean Lawson, which is her husband's name. So I didn't find her because I was looking for a woman who had gone, and I couldn't find one. And so when Joan talked about Jim, she's part of the leftist theater scene in Toronto. She comes from a well-to-do family, but finds her way into the leftist theater scene, becomes part of this incredibly famous play called Eight Men Speak. She declares herself as being bisexual. She calls herself Jim. She dresses like a man. She decides to be a reporter for the Toronto Clarion, the communist paper, and go over. Like she just and then ends up driving an ambulance for the MacPaps. I mean, it just seemed like such an incredible story.
Yeah.
So,
And the MacPaps, the Mackenzie Papineau Regiment. So there were regiments of volunteers from all over the world.
yeah, there was around 60,000, I think, joined the international brigades from maybe 40 countries. But there was, I think, 1,600, between 1,200 and 1,600 Canadians that went to fight in the Spanish Civil War. Even though it was illegal, they felt it was the right thing to do.
So Mackenzie King made it illegal for Canadians to go over.
Yes.
So they had to sneak across, like take.
Yeah, they would take a
boat.
boat, so they would get to Paris. They'd get on a boat, go to London, try to get to Paris, get a train down, walk over the Pyrenees.
Walk over the Pyrenees.
Wow.
That's how much they believed in trying to depose fascism.
Yeah.
And so then there's no Peterborough connection to that necessarily. We were very interested in it. But how did you find our other Jim and the Peterborough connection?
So I was looking, so I wanted to find a Peterborough connection, and I found there's a great website, which I think you found, that talks about all the people who went over, and I just looked for who went over, and then I looked and found Jim Higgins, and who spent he was from England, but spent most of his life in Peterborough and raised his family here, and then found his incredible story. And I read the you can't get it, but I went to the reference library. There's a book by Manuel Alvarez, I think his name is, called The Tall Soldier, and he was a young boy.
We're not going to give the whole story.
Okay.
You're going to tell the beginning of this. You're
Yeah.
absolutely going to tell the beginning. I'm going to stop you at a certain point.
Okay.
You're going to have to come see our play. So, tell what happened, Jim Higgins.
I'm not even going to talk about
No,
it.
do it. I think it's so important to tell
Okay.
the beginning.
Okay.
I'm just going to tell them what you're saying.
Okay. So Manuel was a young boy who was in a town,
Is
and
it Herbal?
I don't think it was, or
Okay.
could have been, could have.
No, I'm wrong. Oh,
Oh,
sorry. And we don't have.
Urbo, it was the Battle of Urbo.
I started working on your play. I'm so excited I got it right.
Ebro.
Thank you. Okay.
And they had a lot of ammunition in this town. So, I mean, the incredible thing about the Spanish Civil War is, so the West were terrified of another world war, which is why they didn't want to get involved. But the Germans were not supposed to be involved at all, but they were also sending the Luftwaffe, and Spain was, Italy was also helping, and so they had big guns, big amount of money and ammunition, and they bombed the hell out of Ebro because there was these military stuff hidden there, and Manuel was part of an explosion, was floating down a river.
Basically
drowned, and Jim picks up this boy.
But every bone in his body is broken, and
Yeah.
they don't think he's going to live.
Yeah, and they bring him. Jim brought him to get help, but he also, and I read. It just seemed like such an interesting person, and to me, he also. What I found interesting about Jim, both Jims, is they wanted to make a difference in the world, and I think the central question of the play is, can one person make a difference in the world? And you look at what's happening in our world today, and sometimes I think it's very easy for us to say, let's just go back to bed, put the
Blinders down.
blinders down.
Yeah.
Let's just look at our Instagram and go to Barbie movies, and I think it's very tempting. And I think we need to be reminded that even one person can make a difference in the world. And I think what I like about their stories, and I've taken artistic liberty here by having them cross paths, but
We don't know if Jim and Jim actually cross paths in the play. They do.
yeah,
We can say that.
I mean, they could have.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, that's
yeah.
it's possible.
So, but I've also kind of compressed time within the play to make it more artistically interesting. But I think that was I thought it was interesting, his story, and he was very typical of the time as well. So somebody who, you know, we also have to remember, sometimes the left, communism gets a very bad name because of, there's a lot of crappy communists.
Well, also it's partly that it's fake news from the other side.
Yeah,
the positioning of it.
But also, at that time during the Depression, so this is during the Depression, you know, men like Jim wanted to work and could not find work.
And he was put into the hobo camps, like they were like armed camps in
Yeah.
BC.
Yeah.
He was one of the organizers of the ride to Ottawa.
Yeah.
And that got stopped in Regina, right? And the
Yeah.
RCMP beat them all, and that's how that ended.
Yeah.
But all the way along, people were feeding them. Like, people were so excited because there were no jobs. These men wanted to work. And what's interesting about Jim Higgins is he then ends up in Peterborough after the Spanish Civil War. He has 5 children. He's widowed quite young.
Mm-hmm.
He raises his children here. He at some point writes his memoir.
Yeah.
He dies in '83, and his daughter Jeanette publishes this in 2018, and
Yeah.
you find it, right?
Yeah, after I'd already decided to put him in a play. Like,
I know.
Yeah. So it was kind of,
So tell us a bit about what Fighting for Democracy, like Jim Higgins's memoir, autobiography, did for you in terms of the play.
well, I think, it certainly gave me a lot more background to him as a character, but it also gave me that perspective of why somebody would go and fight in a battle that's not our own, right? And I think they saw quite rightly that fascism needed to be stopped. And if it hadn't been stopped in Spain, would we have gone on to a world war? Like, it's interesting, one of my delightful side gigs that I do is direct audiobooks. And one of them I just directed was The Peace by Romeo Dallaire. And his take is that we need to get involved at the right time. Like, had the UN given him 5,000 troops in Rwanda, they may have been able to stop the slaughter.
Really?
And but who's going to risk those 5,000?
Yeah, it's the
Right.
crystal ball moments, right?
Yeah.
Where someone has to be brave enough.
So these guys were saying somebody had to stop them. In Spain, it was a democratically elected government that was being overthrown by the fascist military, and it was a coup, and they thought it was wrong, and they thought the West should have stood up and fought it. And so I think there was also a sense of hopelessness in Canada as well, that felt like, okay, you know, if we're going to fight for these ideals, we need to go and put them.
Because it's so hard. Some people are non-interventionists, right? Why are we getting involved in someone else's battle over there? We've just all come out of this first horrible Great War. But I think what you do so beautifully in the script is say that exactly what you're saying, is that those young people could see that if they could stop fascism in Spain, they could maybe stop the spread of fascism throughout Europe. Now, they were unsuccessful, and I mean, Franco ruled until 75, right? His death in 75. So it's so interesting to think they were unsuccessful, but they tried so hard.
Yeah. And I think there was a certain amount of idealism, and it was it's also interesting how many writers went over, Hemingway and Martha Gellhorn and Lillian Hellman and Dorothy Parker and
some Hollywood types
and
as well.
Orwell.
Errol Flynn wanted to get his
Flynn.
picture taken, and then he got injured. He was unhappy about getting injured. I believe he got injured on the front.
So it was kind of this idealistic, poetic. People wrote poetry, and then of course the disillusionment with what war actually is, and the infighting in the left. You know, it's kind of all fell apart.
Yeah, and of course, as the rest is, as we know, it's history. I'm curious about your writing. What was for Jim Watts Girl Reporter? Do you remember the first thing you wrote?
Probably the first scene. Well, I had I think it was starting with the play.
Yeah. So Eight Men Speak is in the play. And also, I was just going to say that, strangely enough, on May 1st, Eight Men Speak is having a staged reading, it's May Day, at Theatre on King, right? Lee Bolton is directing it. Is Lee here?
No, she isn't.
Oh, okay.
They're rehearsing this afternoon.
Oh, are they? Okay, right, yeah, so I don't know what.
It's on Thursday, this coming Thursday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right, it's May this Thursday. May 1st, yeah.
Oh, sorry, Wednesday.
Wednesday, so
Sorry,
May
thank
1st,
you.
Wednesday at Theatre on King, they're doing a reading of Eight Men Speak, which is a play within the play that Jim Watts was sort of part of when she was doing the radical leftist
Yeah, she
theatre.
started off directing it and then
Yes.
got booted out from directing it.
Once it got too controversial, they felt they needed a man to direct.
Oh.
I'm curious about someone like the poet Dorothy Livesay, who's a character. Were they like? Is that artistic license that they're friends, or were they friends in real life?
Total friends.
They were
Best friends, yeah.
Okay.
And maybe more.
Michaela's here. She's playing Dorothy Livesay.
Oh,
yeah. Do you remember?
Yeah,
Probably finished. But yeah. So what made you put D in?
Because, they kind of became these leftists together, and I think there was a kind of a competition between them a little bit as writers, and of course Dorothy Livesay became a very famous Canadian poet. I brought some stuff for you to read from I read Dorothy Livesay's books,
Yes.
and she talks a lot about, she called her Gina, and just her take on Jim is really interesting.
Okay.
And then there's another kind of interest, somebody did their PhD thesis on Dorothy Livesay and Jim Watts, and how they're perceived, and a lot of people felt that Jim should be as remembered as much as Dorothy.
But people don't know Jim. I mean, she
Yeah,
has sort of
yeah.
gone from the.
Yeah, whereas Dorothy Livesay is much more
more
famous.
Now, it was interesting because Maya's here, Maya Ardle, who's a playwright with us, of course, as well. You have very different approaches to how you, because I taught a playwriting course a couple years ago at Transit. I had you both in to talk to those students, but you have different approaches to how you get organized to write. Tell me about how you get organized to write. Can you talk about it?
Sure.
Is it standard?
I read a lot usually.
You are
Yeah.
a voracious researcher.
Yeah, so I
as are you.
do a lot of research, and then but there's a time you have to pull yourself out of the research rabbit hole and actually write. I do write, so I write a lot of notes, and then I try to make the notes into some sort of order, and then I try to do some sort of outline, and then I start writing, and then I go back to my outline. That's kind of how I do it. What I have to do though is block time, because I have other projects and there's life, and I can get very easily distracted. So I have a program on my computer called Freedom, and it blocks the internet. And so it
Write
forces
that
me-
one down.
Freedom. And it blocks it. I mean, you can get around it if you're asleep. You can always look at your phone. So I try to write solidly for an hour, then take a break, and then come back. And then I actually feel like I'm getting something done. But I find, I don't know if you find this too, Maya, but I find first drafts absolutely painful. Really
What about
painful.
them? It's painful.
Oh, you just, well, you know what it should be, and you're not there yet, right? You know it's going to be bad. It's always bad. The first draft is always bad. It's so not true.
I've read your first draft. So.
Okay. But you know they're not. You want it. So
But you must have a fast brain then, I would say, because you're seeing an end.
I'm seeing an end
And
point
then-
where I want it to be.
Right. Okay.
And
I
know
see
it's
that.
not there.
Okay. All right.
And so, but I think I like to write. When I teach playwriting, I talk about writing in layers. And so I want to get the first layer, which is the foundation, is a kind of a style and structure. But your dialogue might be clunky, and you might not know your characters. It's like all these people coming to a party and you don't really know them yet, right? And so somebody will, if you do a reading and somebody says, I don't like this line, I'm like, who cares about that? I can cut that line, change that line on opening night. What I can't change once you go too far down is structure. The basic story. That, to me, that's really where you've got to find your substance and then keep building on it.
And because you've written a lot from historical.
Yeah, I keep telling
information.
myself not to do that. You hear about people is it Susan Laurie Parks who wrote Top Dog, Underdog in a Weekend or something, and you think, oh, and she won a Nobel, and it's
Well,
just,
good to compare yourself.
Yeah.
but, you know, when you write plays with research, it's a lot that you could go, it feels like a lot.
And there's a box to constrain you somewhat that
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
as opposed to just an idea that emerged out of your brain and then go for it, right?
Mhm.
And tell me about you and dramaturgy. Like, what kind of dramaturgy do you like or works for you? It's like the literary manager. We talked about this last week as well. Sort of the person, the outside eye, I guess. Like, how do you
Like me dramaturging, or
No,
or
somebody
being
dramaturg, being dramaturg. You being dramaturg. What?
I would say the most successful dramaturges are people like yourself who have an eye to direct it. Is often the best. I've worked with just dramaturges before, but the play that I'm having done in Blythe, I worked with Severn Thompson on it, and she's a director as well. I think there's something practical about that. And I think the best dramaturges, I mean, there's some very good dramaturges, like Joanna Falk is very good, and you know, people, but they want to try to help you write the play you want to write, rather than the play they want to see. In some ways, I think that's what you want. So, starting to talk about, you know, or I like to be able to try to figure out before I show it to somebody, what is the central question of the play? What are the themes I'm working on? What is my eye to what this play is about, so that by the time a dramaturge comes into it, you know, you have a foundation that you know when they're giving you feedback, that rings true to me, that I can't do. You know, like, you have something, if you sow it too early, I think you could probably be swayed down roads that maybe you don't want to go.
Do you think it's ever happened to you?
Maybe early on.
Right. Because you're pretty. I think you're strong enough.
Yeah.
My sense
Yeah.
from working with you is that you also take it away and you sit with it, and then I think you would say, no, I'm not.
Yes, for
doing
sure.
that.
Yeah, but I think if you don't know what your play is about or what you're trying to do, you may not know
Right.
how that, right? So
And do you have a time of day and a place you write at home?
I have an office in
Yeah.
my house. Yeah.
It's now. What is it now? No, it's Allison was just talking about hers. She's got it. It's warmer now.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, mine's
wow.
warmer too. Mine was
Is
warmer
it?
too,
Okay.
because I used to be in a room with no heat, and then my son moved out, and I got.
And a time of day you like to write? Or?
I like in the morning if I can. Yeah.
Like what's morning mean to you?
Well, usually I get to my computer at 9 every morning, and it depends how many emails and what other things I'm working on, how soon I can get to it. But if I can get to it by 10 and 10 to noon, that would be a good prime.
A good chunk.
Mm-hmm.
And how many days a week will you do that if you're
Well,
writing?
Depends, because right now I'm juggling mini projects. So, but what I really like is other draft. Like, I don't like the first draft, and often when I'm doing a first draft, I will try to go on a kind of a retreaty kind of place. And when I was working on Jim Watts, I went to Halt's Island, which Tracy told me about, which is a lovely writer's artistic retreat in Halliburton. And in the Corpus, and had 10 days there, and then I got a good chunk done. And that kind of thing, when I'm just starting a project, I'd say that's the ideal, is to go on a retreat somewhere for a week or 2 weeks and really get a start on with no interruptions, and then I can write subsequent drafts and pieces here and there.
And so you'll take all your research with you, or you'll have it on your computer, or whatever, and then do you keep going back and forth to the research while you're writing that first draft?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, and I actually wrote Jim Watts in a software program called Scrivener, which is really for novelists, but it does help organize research. So you've got down this side your scenes, and you can have different links for research, and then you've got here where you're writing your dialogue, and then you can go into the old recipe card thing and make notes there.
And you were doing all of that?
I did that, yeah, to kind of keep and I had timelines like what I've got here, timelines, and even though I played a bit fast and loose with time, I wanted to know exactly, is this plausible? But yeah, it is a writer's trap, I think, research and how much you do, because you can always say, well, I can't write this because I have to now go research this.
Yeah, sometimes you have to write the play.
Yeah.
It's the number one dramaturgical thing I say to people. Yeah, that's all great, but now you have to write the play.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say, yeah.
It's a good way of procrastinating.
Right? It's also the fear of that first word on the laptop.
Yeah. And I think Colleen Murphy once talked about research, and she said she just writes it and then researches it afterwards, kind of, right?
I'm kind of more like that a little bit too, and Judith is certainly like that.
Yeah.
In terms of who killed, well, I shouldn't say that. Judith did research for Who Killed Snow White, but she doesn't worry so much about the form.
Yeah.
She just,
She gets up at 4 a.m. and writes, and
Yeah.
it's brilliant. And,
she's Judith Thompson.
yeah.
So this summer, you have an unusual thing happening to you that doesn't happen to a lot of playwrights. What is going on for you this summer? You have Jim Watts, but then you have something else going on.
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate that I have a play also at the Blythe Festival called The Trials of Maggie Pollock, about a woman from Blythe who in 1919 was charged and convicted of witchcraft. So it's an interesting.
And they open one day apart?
They open.
How does that ever happen?
It's a logistics nightmare for me. So, a wonderful problem to have. But yes, Jim Watts opens August 1st and Maggie opens August 2nd.
Wow.
Yeah. So you'll be back and forth along the 401 or the 407?
I'm looking, I'm going to get a transponder.
Yes. 407. Yes, all right.
I'll see how expensive that is. I think it's pretty expensive.
But I think it'll be a lifesaver.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't spend all of your writer's royalties on the 407. But for your peace of mind and your sanity.
Yeah. I might even take the 7.
Yeah.
It adds half an hour or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're already organizing it
I'm
all.
looking.
That's great. I'm so grateful you spent some time talking to me about it. I'm obviously getting excited. I got the script photocopied. Emma photocopied it and 3-hole punched it, and I got my 1.5-inch black binder, and it has begun. The research has begun, so it feels like it's really coming very quickly for all of us. It'll be fun to have you at the farm for whatever portion of it this summer, and I'm so grateful you spent today with us. I'm curious if anybody has any questions before we get going.
I just have a simple question, and it is, I have grandsons who are 10 and 13. Would this be a play that they could enjoy?
I think so.
In my opinion, yes.
Yeah,
They live in Germany, so they have been to
swear
Spain.
word in it, maybe.
How many swear words, Emma?
A few more than that.
We always check the swear words in our play.
If you're okay with that, but other than that, I think, yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah, I think they'd find it exciting.
Okay, thank you.
When you're writing a play, does it evolve from the central question, or does you kind of do the story and eventually the central question emerges?
I start the story.
Right.
And I think the first thing I'm trying to find is my central question.
Right.
Like in my reading.
Right. But you
about-
don't wait for that to emerge before you start writing a story,
and
right?
one exercise I do is try to, there's that old, TV guide synopsis thing for
Like a
Yes,
long
yes,
line
yes.
or the
Oh,
tag.
so you try to.
try to
If you were pitching this to Netflix,
yes,
that's
what
what I
would
would say to
it be?
people,
Yeah,
what would it
and
be?
so I try to determine that when I'm writing, but that can change, through the whole writing process.
Right.
Yeah, I would say, probably took me 6 months to find that central question, even though it
Wow.
seems very obvious now to
Mhm.
me,
Yeah.
but only kind of in retrospect of that.
Linda?
Do you have a stack of scripts to dramaturgs where people have asked you to look at their stuff? Do you feel overwhelmed And part B is, will you look at mine?
Yes, I do drama. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I would.
But do you feel overwhelmed by, like, is that something that's like, oh, shit, I can't get to that?
It might be a little bit. I'd have
Yeah.
to kind of think about it. But, I'm working with Claire Ross and done on a play right now. And
Cool.
I do like dramaturging. I just also worked with Diane Flax and Richard Greenblatt and pals, and that was super fun.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm a part B. Your a part C, I guess. Yeah. Sweden. There's.
My grandmother was from Sweden.
So have you ever explored that?
As a play, I wrote a play that never got done, which was about the Spanish flu. And about immigrants coming, because my grandmother kind of came to Canada around that time, and so I wrote a play about people coming from Sweden to Canada and people getting sick. But then, Kevin Kerr wrote a play about the Spanish flu, kind of around the same time. That was one of the Governor Generals, and I was like, okay. Yeah, but.
Maybe in 5 years is the time again.
Yeah,
We're on the other side of
I
the
have to look at it again. I can't remember. Yes, Maggie.
Maggie and
Oh,
I.
Given your direction of novels these days, and you do a lot of that, have you ever been, because of that proximity to that form, are you growing to be interested in writing novels? Does it ever attract you to write a novel?
No, but I wish I was the editor.
On for novels?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's sometimes I go, come on, you can take that line out. No, I have such respect for novelists. I feel like I'm a bit too impatient or something to write a novel. And I
All
have
the
to,
description, the flowery
well, the
description.
time it takes. Like my novelist friends, I would say it takes 7 years. That's what I'd say before starting. Wouldn't you say? Yeah. Unless you're, on a roll or whatever, you've got them waiting for you. But from the start to getting it published, getting it out, I think that's about a 7-year process. And I've seen Anne-Marie work on novels, and I guess I also to be able to afford to write a novel. I don't think I can, right? Like I feel like to have the money to take that 7 years, not being enough. I think with Anne-Marie, she wrote a great novel that then paid for the next novel, which paid for the next novel, which paid for the next novel. But I certainly love working. Directing audiobooks because I love living in the world of literature. I feel it's a real honor to do that. Especially great writing is amazing. So I have great respect for authors.
Maya?
Oh yeah, I love it when people raise the issue of what a dramaturge is, because in my many years in the biz, I would say most dramaturges are terrible. I'm deadly serious. I mean, there are so many dramaturges who think they're there to somehow be your doctor and to fix you and change you or whatever. There's a fix-it kind of thing, or to psychoanalyze your characters and stuff like that. And I totally agree with you that dramaturgs like Kim, for example, what is it about you, Kim? Well, first of all, you didn't declare yourself a dramaturg. You just want to help make a play fulfill everything it can possibly be to bring to this stage. Because I never forget when I was writing The Hero of Hunter Street, I called Kim up. I said, Kim, I've got something to confess to you. She said, what? I said, my characters keep bursting into song. And there was just like, she went, okay. I went, what, is that it? Yeah, sure. Okay. Okay. Well, good. Let's move on here. But I think listening to you all, the most wonderful thing about a dramaturg is somebody who actually believes in your characters, who actually thinks of them as real, completely real human beings. and talks to you. And the only other person that did that with me was Urja Koreda, the great, wonderful Urja Koreda of the Tarragon Theatre, who actually sort of wanted to just chat about the people that you have brought into your play, as if they're completely human. And I think that enriches us writers, because we start to feel the kind of multi-layers of each one of our human beings, though they never become tidy and plastic and fit correctly into a form. So I just, it was just nice for me to have, listen to what you think a dramaturg is, because we may have different approaches as we sort of dive into our work, but I think we both probably agree about what a really good dramaturg is.
And I think a good dramaturg also frees you as a writer, because I can write and go, oh, Kim will catch me if that's crappy.
Yeah.
A little bit. You can,
Right, yeah.
you know, you've got second eyes on it, that somebody's going to say,
Yeah, it's a bit of that safety net, right?
Yeah.
The director gives the actor the safety net, right? The
Yeah.
external eye,
yeah,
the eye of the audience as well, to make sure the actors are safe to just play. The playwright is just safe to play and try and experiment.
yeah. And because, we tell you if you're way off line, because you don't know, you're writing in your room by yourself,
Yeah.
and you don't know, and so and also having workshops is huge. We had that workshop we had, when you hear it out loud, is hugely helpful.
There is a moment, right?
Yeah.
I think I read a draft or two, and then there's just a moment where you go, it's now time, we have to hear this read by actors.
Yeah.
That is the next piece of the puzzle. I can't respond anymore because I've read it, so I've read it and we've had notes. But to put actors in a room reading it once or twice or over a few days, so much of it in the hearing of it, because this isn't a living, breathing art form. It must have the actors speaking those lines, inhabiting those characters, I think.
Yeah, and you don't know until you hear it out loud where it lags and what doesn't work, what sounds corny.
I'm always waiting for the moment where the actors all start to shift and you can tell they check their phones, and I always mark that moment in the script. They got a little bit fidgety here, because that's guaranteed where an audience will get fidgety. And maybe that's okay, but what's going on there that they're fidgety there, and how much more structurally of the first act is there, and all that. And are you pretty structurally normal that way? A longer first act, a shorter second act, if you're doing a 2-act piece?
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I don't know. Have I ever seen a play where the second act was longer than the first? Well, not a good play. Yes, Lindy.
I just wanted to mention we're on live streaming on Facebook, and a gentleman named Ray Hoff from Victoria has posted a bunch of stuff about Jim Watts and some photos and stuff on the comment thread on Facebook. So if anyone's interested.
She lived later in her life.
Vancouver,
BC, BC.
So thank you, Ray, for that. And if anyone wants to check it out, you can do that on our Facebook page.
Great.
Other questions? Yes.
I have a question. Of all the plays you've written yourself, what one would you say, regardless of what you might consider success outwardly for you, which one is your heart?
I think Innocence Lost. It's probably my most successful, but I think it's the subject of it and how meaningful it was to meet people, and how much I learned, and just the response from people, and having it be to know that people are real people. I think that one was really.
And at the heart, what we're doing in this with art is the transformative power of theater and art to change people's lives in the world.
Yeah.
Would you be able to, you think you saw it so clearly?
Yeah, I saw that clearly, and I had a woman coming up to me sobbing, I know somebody who's been wrongfully convicted. Can you write a play about such? I need this story to be out in the open, and So I would say also Thin Ice was a play that I wrote with Vanuja Rubas, and it toured. We did it for Theatre Direct under Susan Saran, and it was about date rape and
consent.
sexual and consent, and it was in the 80s, and we had incredible response from the students, and the teachers did not like it. and we had Catholic boards shutting us down, and it was because
We have some school teachers from out of Scotland. They wouldn't have done that.
but in the play, it really was about discussion of consent, and
And almost 50 years old?
Yeah,
What, 40, 45,
yeah,
40
40
years?
years. 40 years.
I was curious when I was doing research how it held up.
You know, it's still, about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, theater directed a reading of it, and I went to hear it, and we had a young woman come up to us afterwards and say, I'm in trouble, this happened to me, and where do I go for help, and, yeah, it simples up, it's probably the Madonna references are probably maybe
Well, Madonna might not think that. Tell Madonna she might not be as relevant.
but
yeah.
that one,
I actually, when I was reading it, I thought, I'd love to get that one and read it.
yeah,
from you.
you should read it, yeah,
I would
it's,
love
I think it still does, yeah. It used to be done in high schools a lot as well, but it toured a lot in Ontario and in Quebec, and caused a lot of trouble. But the teachers, many teachers did like it because it was an entry form of conversation. And but what theater direct realized, that they needed to send, materials to the teachers beforehand. They needed to have somebody there who, if somebody came up to them afterwards with issues, where do they go to for help?
And now more than ever, doing a play like that, there has to be a planned response to support people, because people really can access how emotionally triggered they are by something in a way they wouldn't have back then in the same way. And you have to have an entire program.
Yeah, and I don't think they knew how powerful it was going to be until they started it, but it had been commissioned by METRAC, I think it was called, which was, I can't remember what the acronym is for, but it was against violence of women and women. Anyway, so they put together the materials, and so they got on it very quickly, I think.
Well, I'm going to say, would you all join me in thanking Bev Cooper for spending some time? Lovely rainy afternoon inside, and please come to the farm this summer. Did we bring? Are there brochures downstairs?
Yep. Yes, there are.
If you don't have one, if you haven't gotten yours in the mail yet, there's something in our system isn't working. But yeah, thank you all for coming, and thank you.
Thank you.